This is our tutorial for continuous range, and we're going to remember that range is our y values. And just like before when we did domain, we've got three different graphs to look at, and we're going to use our highlighters. Since we're talking about range and range is the y values, I'm going to use my green highlighter to highlight my y-axis and my y values, to remind myself that those are the numbers that I need to be looking at. I'm not going to be looking at the x-axis anymore. I'm going to be looking at the y-axis because y-axis is range. And I also need to get my boundary numbers just like I did before. So I'm going to use my yellow highlighter to get my boundary numbers. And since the y-axis is the up and the down axis, the vertical axis, my boundary numbers are going up and down. So you kind of think bottom to top or low to high. So if I use this to go to the very bottom of the graph, the bottom of the blue graph is right there. And where does that line up with the y-axis? Well, that lines up at the -4. You can see where the two highlighters cross. So I'm going to draw my line over. I'm going to write a -4 down here. Then I'm going to find my upper boundary or my high point, my top of my blue graph. There's the top of it, doesn't go any higher. That's my upper boundary, and it lines up with the +4 on the y-axis. I'm going to move this and I'm going to draw my line over. That's at the +4. Okay, so, and then some people like to write it underneath, so you can write like this as well. And I'm going to remember that it's the y, so it's everything in between those two numbers, from the -4 up to the +4. So when I write my answer, to show that it's everything in between, I use those less than symbols. And then I need to remember about the dots. A closed-in dot, or if it touches a curve or a part of the line segment, that means it includes that number, so you underline the symbol. If it's what we call an open dot, then that means it doesn't include it, so we don't underline it. Well, if I look up high to where that +4 was and go over where the dot is, that's an open dot, so I don't underline. There shouldn't be any underline over here, and there's not. So I'm just going to leave it the way it was. But if I look down low where the -4 came from, that came from a curve. And while there doesn't show a dot there, there really is. That's the same thing as there being a dot there. It touches the -4, it includes it, so we underline it. So it's everything in between and including the -4 up to the +4, but not including the +4. So another way to say that are all real numbers greater than or equal to -4 and less than the +4. And if I keep going to the next one, and again, I'm going to bring down my highlighters, whoops, so that I can use them on the rest of my graphs. So I'm going to bring down my green highlighter on my y-axis. I'm going to bring down my boundary highlighter. I notice if I always go low to high, so I'm going to go low first, and the lowest spot is right there, again on an endpoint, but that crosses at the -2 on the y-axis. So I'm going to draw that over. I'm going to put -2. And then if I try to find the upper boundary, some people will go to here, but remember that's not a point, that's an arrow. So an arrow isn't a boundary because it's the same thing as it keeps going and going and going and going. So it keeps going up, 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 and up. And that's really the same thing. I'm going to use like a different color as saying from this -2 on the y-axis where it started, it just kept going up, 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 and it never stopped. So I do have my y and my -2, but I don't have two boundaries. I just have the one boundary. So I need to decide whether I use a less than or greater than symbol. Well, since it was going up as it went out to the left, all those numbers up above the -2 are greater than, so I'm going to use a greater than symbol. And since the dot on the -2 was a closed-in dot, I'm also going to underline it. So it's all the numbers greater than or equal to a -2. Now if I keep going, I'm going to bring down my y boundary, my y-axis highlighter and my boundary highlighter. This is the unrestricted version. So we've done two versions. We've done fully restricted, 2 boundary points, partially restricted, 1 boundary point. And this is our unrestricted because if I try to go low, Oops, I'm erasing it. I'm not moving it. If I try to go low, I see I've got an arrow. I don't have a boundary point. If I try to go up high, again, I have an arrow. I don't have a boundary point. So it's basically the same thing as if this graph just continues going down forever and continues going up forever. So it's like that green highlighter goes down to the negative and up the positive of the y-axis, but it never stops. And just like on domain, when this happens side to side, on range, when this happens, we have no boundaries up and down. We say all real numbers again because it didn't have any boundaries. It just kept going on forever. And we can use that double R symbol as well.